Hey everybody, welcome back to the Let's Talk Q&A show. This is the weekly show where I'll be answering all of your questions. And this week, we got the most questions that I have ever been asked before. Thank you guys all so much. That's something that really humbles me. I really appreciate all your support in asking all these questions. Back in the day when this show started, we only got but it was still just Let's Talk Physical Media, and they combined the Q&A and, the regular physical media show. We only got a few questions each week, and this week, I think it got close to 30 questions, which is absolutely crazy. Thank you guys all so much. I really, really, really appreciate that. Of course, I'm not going to be able to answer every single one of those questions on this week's show. So if I don't answer your question on this week's show, I promise you guys I'll make sure I answer that at the top of next week's show or sometime during next week's show. So if I skipped your question the last couple of weeks, it'll definitely be on this show. And if I ever miss one of your questions, guys, make sure you go back and tag me in that question and be like, hey, did you forget this question? Because I am a human being, and sometimes I'll make a mistake and delete the photo by accident. So sometimes it does help me to just remind me that I might have skipped your question, which I really try and answer every single one of them. And without further ado, let's dive into this week's questions. And the first question is from Kylie Tinkle, and she said, question for next week. Can you rank the Alien films, including the Alien vs. Predator movies? I was actually surprised I haven't done this on the channel yet. The thing with the Alien franchise is I feel like everybody has the same 1, 2, and then it starts to get a little murky after that. Most people don't feel like it's the strongest franchise out there. There have been some great classic films in the franchise, while there's also been some films that have been called some of the worst of all time. So it's been a very mixed bag. But it is a franchise that does include Ridley Scott's Alien and James Cameron's Alien, so we can't overlook the franchise as a whole, but there definitely have been some stinkers. So we'll start at the bottom. At number 9, we got Alien Covenant. This was Ridley Scott's follow-up to Prometheus. Prometheus wasn't promoted as an Alien film, but Alien Covenant was, and people were so excited for this one, and this one was a fucking dud. This one was absolutely horrible. Number 8, I got Alien vs. Predator Requiem. One of the hardest movies to watch because it's just so damn dark. It had some good ideas. This is the one also features the guy who plays Sean from the show Rescue Me. Appreciated seeing him because I'd never seen him in anything else but this movie. It's just a shame that the movie itself it's just really hard to watch. It could have been better. At number 7, I got Alien vs. Predator. Now, this is one that I have a soft spot for. It's not the greatest film overall, but I did see this in the theaters in the summer. I don't remember how old I was. I want to say 13, 14 years old. Didn't have a job yet, so I just remember going to the theater with my buddy Talon and seeing this movie in theaters and having an absolute blast with it. We're big Alien fans, big Predator fans. They're going to be versing each other. We had a good time. Now, looking back on the movie and on rewatches since, is Alien vs. Predator a good movie? No, not really, but again, I still kind of have a soft spot for it. At number 6, I got Alien Resurrection or Alien 4. And this was going to be the last one that really rounded out the original Alien franchise. After this, it was kind of okay, we're going to go back to Ridley Scott. We'll have the Alien vs. Predator movies. But this felt like the end of the original 4 films that were kind of connected. But Alien Resurrection, it has its moments. I can't say I absolutely hate Alien Resurrection. It's nothing like Alien Covenant. It does still have its moments. It's still watchable. It's just, it's not one I run back to. I really only run back to my top 3. And at number 5, I got Prometheus. I went into this movie expecting it to be a bad movie because I had heard all this stuff about it. And then when I watched the movie, I was like, it's not that bad. It's got its moments. I enjoyed this one overall. It's got a pretty decent cast. Michael Fassbender's in this. Idris Elba pops up in this one. A lot of people have said as the years have gone on, it's also kind of a Christmas movie. So it's got its reasons for being in the top 5. Number 4, Alien 3. Now, this is the one that started David Fincher's directing career. And the first three Alien movies were directed by Ridley Scott, James Cameron, and David Fincher. And Alien 3 should have been a great film, but as David Fincher has talked about, unfortunately Fox got involved and they pretty much just butchered the film. It was just too much interference, and David Fincher really had a horrible time making the movie. He pretty much has forgotten about Alien 3, even though there is a director's cut. He doesn't really like to talk about it. It was a horrible experience for him, and it is his worst film almost by default, because after this he does 7, and then every movie after that is good to great. But Alien 3, it's at least watchable. It's got some good ideas. It's got some good production design. It just at points feels very, very generic, and that burnt orange, beige, brown look to it never really 100% worked for me. Then at number 3, I got Alien Romulus, the one that came out last year. And like I said, not really too hard to crack the podium of Alien movies. And Alien Romulus, yeah, it's taken a lot from the first 2 Alien movies. And there are some cringeworthy moments where they take dialogue directly from like Alien or Aliens. And they're trying to really play with your expectations of those films. And this movie kind of tying back into those 2 films. They know what people like. And those moments would always take me out of the film. But when you watch the movie as a whole and you watch the great effects in this movie, I mean, the great sound design, the acting is pretty good. I think Alien Romulus is still a very good, very rewatchable film, and it is easily the 3rd best Alien movie. Then we get to number 2, and this is where I'll have Aliens. James Cameron's Aliens. I know people who this is their favorite film ever. This is actually the next film after One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest that me and David did on the Let's Talk Movie podcast. The next movie that we'll be doing is Aliens. So as an 80s movie fan, how do you not love Aliens? It's endlessly rewatchable. This just takes it to the more action over the tops. The story goes, James Cameron went on a whiteboard, he wrote Alien, and then he wrote an S after it and put a money sign through it. Let's just add more aliens. We only had 1 in the first one. Let's add it. Let's make it an action movie. We'll bring back Sigourney Weaver, and it'll work. And Aliens is a fantastic film. But that, of course, means that I have 1979's Alien at number 1. Alien is a masterpiece. It is one of Ridley Scott's greatest films, one of the best films of the 1970s. If Ridley Scott didn't make Blade Runner, it would easily be my favorite film from him. As far as atmosphere goes, the great score in that movie, the phenomenal acting. I mean, what it's talking about, just regular working Joes and trying to get back home, get their money, and what the fuck happens? An alien boards their ship, and they have to deal with an evil corporation that really just wants that alien and could give a shit and could care less about their employees. It's really messed up, but the movie Alien itself is fantastic, also endlessly rewatchable. It's much more of a slow burn, but if you enjoy those slow burns, you'll definitely enjoy Alien more than Alien. So thank you, Kylie. I really appreciate that question. Thank you so much. And the next question is from our channel director, Mr. Smelly Potato, and he said, do you feel like watching movies on higher quality, 4K and Blu-ray, and on bigger screens helps with your overall enjoyment of the movie? I've noticed I like some movies more than watching them in HD than when watching the same movie as a kid on VHS. And yeah, Mr. Smelly Potato, I agree with you. There's something special about watching these movies in 4K Blu-ray and on Blu-ray compared to when you were a kid watching them on VHS. Now, VHS, I will get very nostalgic for. That's how I came to a lot of my favorite films. There are movies where I'll watch them and I'll be like, I kind of miss that gritty look of it, where everything was like faded and kind of dirty and dusty. That's fun to go back and revisit like for a moment. But overall, I like to see movies in the highest quality on my nice OLED TV with my nice surround sound. When I was a kid, I always imagined having something like that. It's something I always wanted when I grew up, so watching the movies, that's why I collect 4K Blu-rays, mainly is because it's like allowing me now to revisit these films in a new quality that I had never seen before, and getting to do it at home, it's a huge selling point for me and why I collect 4K Blu-rays. I've always been somebody, like when I play video games, I always like to see the new graphical jumps, and it's the same thing with physical media. That's why I love 4K Blu-rays, is that I love to get to revisit these movies that I used to love in a new, higher quality. That's the big selling point of physical media for me. That's why I usually buy all of my favorite films first. That's why I don't really necessarily, well, and also I think they overprice new releases, but that's usually why I also don't buy new releases as much. I'll go see new releases in theaters, but getting to rewatch my old favorite films and having them come to 4K Blu-ray for the first time, that's a big deal for me. That's like why I had to get the Quentin Tarantino movies on 4K Blu-ray. It's like, I would like to see if these are improvements for me. Like True Romance, when that came to 4K Blu-ray, it was a night and day difference between the Blu-ray and 4K Blu-ray. And now every time I get to go back and watch it, it's like rewatching the movie for the first time again. And all that is because of the 4K Blu-ray format. Now, I still don't think that the 4K Blu-ray format has replaced the movie theater experience. Just because, even though we watch these movies in the highest quality at home, you kind of can't take away that movie theater experience of, like, not having your phone out. I mean, you shouldn't have your phone out in theaters. Being able to, like, just lock in on a movie. It's silent. You could really just forget about the rest of the world and lock in the movie. At home, me personally, I have dogs. I have my wife. Things might be going on outside. I can't 100% recreate the theater experience at home. But, man, I do get pretty close, and I am so thankful for the 4K Blu-ray format for that. But Blu-ray is still really good as well. Like, you hear me talking about 4K Blu-rays. There's nothing wrong with Blu-rays also. Blu-rays are great. Some movies just come to Blu-ray and not even on 4K Blu-ray. Like I Saw the TV Glow. That's just coming straight to Blu-ray. I just picked that up along with Heretic, which you guys will see on a review for this coming week. I bought them from A24, and that's fine. There's some great Blu-rays out there. So I hope I'm not selling the Blu-ray format short as well, because that is also a great format. And yeah, I do think we're a little bit spoiled nowadays, and it's funny because I'll come on here and complain about the price of things because they do get a little bit pricey. But thinking back to when I was a kid and watching a literal 13-inch TV in the corner, and because I don't have great eyes, I would have to stand up in front of the TV, like I literally like stand against the wall like this, trying to watch a movie just because I can't see great. It's funny because I'll watch movies in here a lot, mainly if they're foreign films, because again, my eyes aren't the greatest. So when it comes to subtitles, I'd rather sit close. And this is still a great experience, and I do feel like I'm much luckier than when I grew up in the 90s and on those 13-inch TVs. We definitely don't appreciate how lucky we are. Technology does a lot of bad, but it does do some good. So that was a great question too, Mr. Smelly Potato. Thank you so much, buddy. And the next question's from Amanda, and she said, please answer for next week. What are the smartest decisions by villains in movies? I was thinking about this. Like, what would we consider? Because most villains don't end up winning in the end. Mostly, they end up losing. But you gotta look at, like, some villains have great ideas, like Hans Gruber and Thanos, but then eventually they succumb to that because of their egos, their greediness, and they will eventually die and perish, as we have seen. Now, some villains have made some really smart decisions. Look at the usual suspects. Kaiser Soze's caught. He's sitting in the police station, and nobody realizes the entire film that he's sitting there just reading things off the board. He's just outsmarting the cop the entire time, and at the very end, it's revealed to us he was playing the cop. He can walk just fine, and he looks like he's the coolest guy in the room when he lights that fucking cigarette. And that's got to be the smartest move by a villain in film history, because he ends up getting away with it. It's just so rare that we ever see a villain get away with it. Another one I want to point out is in No Country for Old Men, Anton Chigurh. When he goes to the hotel room, this is how smart he is. You know, he takes his shoes off. He's got the silencer. He knows that he's going to surprise these people. He's always one step ahead. I like to say he's playing chess when everyone else is playing checkers. You know, obviously at the very end, you can't plan on getting in a car accident. He didn't blow the red light. That's just kind of the randomness of No Country for Old Men. But things he can control, he's always so smart in those types of movies. But I'm going to give the edge to The Usual Suspects, just because you never expected that at the end of the movie. Although I do think that the ending of The Usual Suspects makes it harder for me to rewatch that movie. Like movies like Fight Club or The Sixth Sense having their twist endings, I can still run back to those movies, but the twist ending for The Usual Suspects, for some reason, hurts the rewatchability for that movie. Not entirely sure why. Maybe it's just because I know he's making up a lot of stuff, and like what we're seeing isn't necessarily the truth, so that kind of hurts the film on rewatch for me. But still, it's a great film, and I mean, what a great villain. I guess you got to give it to the other Kevin Spacey film, Seven. He ends up winning in that. He always was ahead of them. Like, he makes one little hiccup when they find his apartment, and he's like, oh, I'll have to adjust. But at the very end of it, he wanted to die. He does get killed, and he ends up completing his 7 deadly sins serial killing spree. So, I mean, what do you say? He's pretty smart. He did exactly what he wanted to do. He ends up winning. You might look at it as him dying as losing, but that's what he wanted. His plan worked out. As fucked up of a plan as it is, it did work out. So that was a great question, Amanda. Thank you so much. And our next question is from Uncle Charlie, and he actually asked this a couple weeks ago. It took me some time because I actually had to see the movie, but I finally caught up to it. And his question is, what is your opinion on the movie Abruptio? I hope I'm pronouncing that wrong. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. But anyway, I did check this movie out. It is directed by Evan Marlowe, and what's fascinating about this movie is all the characters in this movie are played by giant puppets. Puppets that look like the Garbage Pail Kids, but as adults. And it's never acknowledged or anything. They're just regular puppets living in the real world, going to real places, doing everything that we would do, but they're actually adult-sized puppets, and they're weird-looking puppets. So you kind of got to get past that before you get locked into the movie. But if you get locked into the plot and story of this movie, it is very interesting. It's dealing with such things as anxiety, how we live our life, burying something inside of us. Very David Lynchian in this movie. R.I.P. to the great David Lynch, one of my favorite directors of all time. You know, we haven't gotten to talk about it here on the channel yet, but he did pass away earlier this week on January 20th. Just absolutely, actually it wasn't January 20th, it was last Saturday, but I think maybe it was the 20th. But anyway, he passed away. David Lynch, one of my favorite directors. And there are a lot of great directors out there who kind of are playing in the same ballpark as David Lynch, you know, bringing these dreams and nightmares to the big screen. And I think that this film is another one of those movies. You're not entirely sure what's going on until the very end of the movie, and then it all comes together and it makes a lot of sense. And it's a very well written movie. You feel bad for the lead character. Early in the movie, we see that he's just a very lonely guy. He still lives at home with his mother. He doesn't have a great life. He clearly hates his life. He used to be an alcoholic, and all of these struggles that he's dealing with, and he's also burying something deep inside of him that he doesn't want bubbling to the surface. And when it's revealed to us, I wasn't entirely surprised, but I'm like, that definitely did tie the movie together and made the movie worthy of a watch, in my opinion. At first, I wasn't like too on board with it, but then it all kind of came together in the third act, and I think it's a very well written movie. It's just the hardest thing that people are going to have to deal with is when you watch this are those Garbage Pail Kids type puppets that are in this movie. They are a little bit freaky looking, and you might not be into that. It might be something that you have to get past, but I think if you can look past that, it's still a great film. And if you're somebody who appreciates the puppet work, you're really going to love this movie because it is very impressive. So that was a great question, Uncle Charlie. Thank you so much. And our next question is from Deranged Psychopath, and he said, how strict are you on giving a movie a 5-star rating? And I'm actually very strict on this, and last year in 2024 I didn't give a single movie a 5-star rating. The highest I got was to like 4.5 stars or a 9.5 out of 10. I like to use the out of 10 scale just because it gives a little bit more room. You can give half points. Some movies I think are a little bit better than an 8 out of 10, and they deserve that 8.5. But to give something 5 stars, that's saying that essentially the movie is a masterpiece. Now, there are very rare films that I think are perfect movies, like The Godfather Part 1 and 2, perfect films. But it's very rare. Even my favorite film of all time, The Terminator, I wouldn't say that's a perfect film. I will give that 5 stars. I know people give out 5 stars, 10 out of 10s like crazy. But you're supposed to save that for the best movies that you've ever seen. And I don't like to hand those out too much because it devalues other movies. If I'm always handing out 5 stars, like, where's the line? And also, you got to kind of put certain movies in context. Like, if a movie is like a lower budget film, and I might give that like a 4.5 stars just because I'm impressed with what they're doing, what the actors are doing, how they made great use of the budget. To give that movie 4.5 stars or a 9.5 out of 10 and then be like, oh, is it as close to The Godfather? No, but in its own context, comparing it to other movies with a similar budget, it really is impressive. So for a movie to come along every single year, my favorite films from last year, like Challengers, I Saw the TV Glow, Saturday Night, I thought those were 9.5s out of 10, but they weren't quite perfect. A couple years ago, a movie like Babylon came out. It took me a long time to like give that movie the 5-star rating. I didn't give it to it right away, but on rewatch, it has risen in value. Movies like Goodfellas, that's a 5-star film. Pulp Fiction, that's a 5-star film. Paris, Texas, I consider that a 5-star film. I don't know how many films. I have Letterboxd, guys, if you ever want to follow me on there, JohnKeith55. But you guys could check out how many movies I've actually given 5-star ratings to, and it really isn't that much. At the time of this recording, I'm recording this on Wednesday. Tomorrow, Thursday, I am seeing The Brutalist. I've heard that's fantastic. I would have liked to include that in my top 10 of 2024 list, but it's not actually coming to my area until tomorrow. Tomorrow's the first time I can actually watch it in my theater. I absolutely cannot wait. I've heard nothing, and that's just a kind of movie that speaks to me. A 3.5-hour epic with an intermission built in. Sign me right up. I am excited for that, and you'll get a review for that this upcoming week on the channel, along with our channel director reviews, so really excited to see that. But that might get 5 stars. I don't know. I see a lot of people on the artist formerly known as Twitter giving that one 5 stars. We'll have to wait and see. But to give something a 5-star rating, I think it has to be a really, really, really special film, just as a way not to devalue other films. And I think most movies, for the most part, some of my favorite critics over on the critically acclaimed podcast network, what they do is they go C-, C, and C+. They only give 3 ratings because they don't want to. They don't really like to necessarily rank things and give everything ratings. They just kind of like to go with the basically the Roger and Ebert thing. Is it good or is it bad? Go see this. Don't go see this. I like the challenge of giving movies a rating. It's the same thing with the top 10 list. I like the challenge of a list. What movies get cut, what movies don't. I love the conversation, the comment section with you guys, like seeing what you guys think compared to what I think. I like the fun of that. I think it's fun to like challenge yourself and try and break it down and give a hard cutoff of 10 or rate a movie. Every movie's different. That's another fun aspect of movies. That's kind of actually why I love Letterboxd. But that's a great question. I really do appreciate that, Deranged Psychopath. Thank you so much, buddy. Next question is from Kevin Kruger, and he said, how would you rank the 90s comedies in your Blu-ray collection? I happen to have them all right over here. And at the very bottom, this is a 3-film collection, but we're going to go with Bill and Ted's Bogus Journey. That did come out in the 1990s. It might have been 1990. I don't think that movie is a great follow-up to Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure. The 4K is much better than Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure, though. But I'm going in the order of how I find these movies funny and the quality of the film, not necessarily the quality of the disc. It's a little bit harder to do that with comedies because this disc is fantastic, but the movie itself, not so funny. Next up, I got Clueless. Now, I have this steelbook here, you'll notice. This is a Blu-ray steelbook. This is my wife's favorite film, Clueless. I'll still catch her watching the movie on Max or whatever streaming service it is and never put the disc in, despite the fact this was a gift. Next up, I got Home Alone. This is a great 4K and it's a great film, but if I'm comparing it to just straight up comedies, I gotta put it a little bit lower. Next up, I got Chris Klein and Sigourney Weaver in a 1990s comedy, Dave. I love this movie. Chris Klein plays a guy playing the president. He also plays the president, but when the president has a stroke, they need to bring in a guy who, you know, he plays the president at car lots, whatever, looks very similar to him, because he's the same guy if you go by the actor, and they bring him in, and they find out he's a much nicer, better president than the actual president, because the other president was a schmuck. Like most presidents are, they don't really necessarily care about the people, but Dave cares. Dave's going to balance that budget. Charles Grodin's great in that movie as well. I'm only picking The Spy Who Shagged Me out of this 3-disc Blu-ray set. We'll get to Austin Powers International Man of Mystery in a second, but hopefully The Spy Who Shagged Me gets its own 4K Blu-ray, but it's packed in this set right here. Wow, another 90s Kevin Kline movie, In and Out. This movie came to 4K last year. It's absolutely hysterical. Chris Klein plays a teacher who accidentally gets outed as gay when a former student of his wins the Academy Award, and he plays a gay guy in that movie, and he dedicated to his teacher who happened to be a gay man. Now, this guy was getting married. He was engaged. Tom Selleck's in this movie without his mustache, but it flips his entire life upside down, and that's what this movie's dealing with, and it's also really, really funny. Next up, My Cousin Vinny. Where's My Cousin Vinny on 4K Blu-ray? Me and my wife quote this movie all the time. Also stars Ralph Macchio. When I think of Ralph Macchio, I think of this. Before I think of The Karate Kid, I've never been the world's biggest Karate Kid fan, but I'm a huge fan of this, and every time I see Ralph Macchio at my regular Joe job, I always talk to him about My Cousin Vinny before I ever will talk to him about The Karate Kid, which I think he appreciates, because he's also a big Jets fan, so that's got to be kind of bringing him down. Next up, I got Happy Gilmore. Now, this is going to be coming to 4K Blu-ray this year, and I don't really have too many Adam Sandler movies on Blu-ray, just because they've always been streaming, and I always don't necessarily want to buy them on Blu-ray if they're going to be coming to 4K Blu-ray, but I will make certain exceptions. So, like Happy Gilmore, I just love Happy Gilmore more than Billy Madison, which you guys won't see on here, which kills me, which kills my wife because she loves Billy Madison. I wore the shit out of that VHS as a kid. I can almost quote the entire movie, and I don't think I laugh as much anymore just because I've seen it so much. Next up, I got The Birdcage. This is a fantastic movie starring Robin Williams, Nathan Lane, who was all over the 1990s, Diane Wiest, and the great Gene Hackman. Gene Hackman is funny as hell in this movie. Robin Williams is always great. Robin Williams, he plays the father to a kid. You know, he had him with a woman, and basically Robin Williams and Nathan Lane, though they're a gay couple, they raised that kid, but Gene Hackman married to Diane Wiest. He's a very right-wing Republican kind of guy. He's not somebody who's going to be too pro-gay, so they try and pretend like Robin Williams is actually still married to a woman, you know, kind of doing the whole political thing. And then, of course, shenanigans ensue, and then it all comes out. But still, it's a fantastic movie. There's also a great scene between Robin Williams and Nathan Lane on a bench. I haven't watched this movie in a few years. I really got to rewatch it. That really is truly one of the best comedies of the 90s. Liar Liar from 1997. This is a big one for me and my family. My mom, my brother, my Aunt Stephanie, and me, we just always were quoting Liar Liar. It was a huge deal when it came out. The pen is blue. The goddamn pen is blue. I love Liar Liar. Next up, the sequel to the original Ace Ventura, When Nature Calls. This is a very worthy sequel. I'd argue it might even be funnier than the original Ace Ventura movie. The only thing is, the plot of the movie, it doesn't hook me. I might get some big laughs out of it, but I don't find the movie overall as entertaining and as good as the original Ace Ventura. Next up, we got a 90s classic in Office Space. How many people still quote Office Space to this day? Looks like you got a case of the Mondays. It's absolutely so funny. Great commentary on what it's like to, you know, just be a regular worker bee out there. And, you know, that sucks. I think we all would like to do what the lead character in this movie is doing. And, you know, just kind of like call it, be like, hey, I don't give a shit anymore. We can't do that because we all need money. Next up, now this is kind of the reason why I didn't put it in Blu-ray quality order, because this is my number one, because this is only the director's cut on Blu-ray. It drives me fucking crazy, because I absolutely love the movie Friday, and I would love, and supposedly it's going to be coming to 4K Blu-ray, so we got our fingers crossed on that, but this director's cut kills me. It's just not as funny. The alternate jokes just don't work. But let's not take anything away from the classic that is Friday. Next up, another Robin Williams movie, Mrs. Doubtfire. Ebenezer Doubtfire, my dear. I love Mrs. Doubtfire. Huge one for me growing up in the 1990s. It's funny, when you watch this movie more as an adult, you notice that Sally Field is not wrong and that Robin Williams is not a great dad. I mean, he's a great dad, but he's a terrible, terrible husband. And Sally Field's the one who's got to actually do all the work while he's just out there having fun with the kids. And I understand why the kids love him. Who doesn't love the fun guy? But you got to be a parent too. And also, as a kid, you could probably think Pierce Bronson, what a dick, you know. But then as you get older, you realize, no, he's a great, great, great stepdad. Anyone would kill to have a stepdad like him. So as you get older, your perspective changes. But still, Mrs. Doubtfire is funny. And now, one that might surprise you guys, but it's my favorite Robin Williams movie. Not his best acted movie, but nostalgia plays a big part in that. And I can't let... And nostalgia's taking the wheel on this one. And that's for Jumanji. I'm a huge Jumanji fan. One of my childhood favorites. When I was a kid, this probably was my favorite movie. Obviously, I've gotten older and it might not even crack my top 50 anymore. But it was still so special to me as a kid, that VHS. Got the Blu-ray. It has a 4K. Just I haven't grabbed it because I haven't heard great things. And honestly, one of those movies I burnt out so much as a kid, I probably only revisit it every few years. But it's still very special to me. Speaking of childhood favorites, Kindergarten Cop. I love Arnold Schwarzenegger doing comedy. I know people hate Arnold Schwarzenegger doing comedy, but him teaming up with Ivan Reitman, it always works for me. This and Twins, both fantastic movies. Next up, we're getting a 4K Blu-ray for this in March, but Tommy Boy is one of the all-time comedy classics, and it is one of the best of the 1990s. I told you this was going to come back up, but Austin Powers, International Man of Mystery, this is a great 4K Blu-ray. Has only the international cut on it, which I didn't know existed until I got this 4K Blu-ray, but the 4K is great, but the movie's just a comedy classic. You know, they were going to make Wayne's World 3, but they decided to make Austin Powers instead. You know, I would have loved Wayne's World 3, but I'm glad we got Austin Powers. It's one of the best. And you could kind of put a tie here, but 1994, we've talked about it numerous times. You guys know how much I love Jim Carrey, but 1994, we got The Mask. We got Ace Ventura, Pet Detective, and of course, we got my all-time favorite comedy in Dumb and Dumber. So Dumb and Dumber will be number one, but I'll say it again, Blu-ray, only director's cut. Not a fan of that, but it doesn't take it away from the fact that Dumb and Dumber is the greatest comedy of all time. So that was a great question, Kevin. Thanks so much, buddy. I appreciate it. And the next question is from Haunted Pillowcase, and he asked this, I think it was late the last week or 2 weeks ago, and he said, in your opinion, what are some must-see Kung Fu movies? Now, I am not the biggest Kung Fu movie expert. Honestly, you should probably go to somebody else for that. You've probably heard me talk about every time they announce like the Shaw Brothers collections. I'm not someone who's picking them up, so I'm not really the Kung Fu guy. So when it comes to movies, like, you know, Kung Fu related movies, I'm always going to kind of like recommend like the Kill Bills or any of the Bruce Lee movies because those are always a lot of fun. Enter the Dragon is an all-time classic. Like, there are some great Kung Fu movie experts out there, and there have been so many. That's a very, very, very popular subgenre, and I just feel like me talking about it, I'm going to ruin that for you guys just because I'm not an expert. There's two genres I'm not an expert in at all. I would say it's definitely Kung Fu movies and musicals. I've just never... That's, like, probably my two biggest blank spots. You can ask me more about foreign films than you can ask me about, like, musicals and Kung Fu movies. You could actually probably ask me more about musicals than Kung Fu movies, and I don't want to steer in the wrong way. I don't want to steer in the wrong direction just because I'm not the world's biggest Kung Fu movie fan. There's a few out there I like I said, mostly Bruce Lee movies, Enter the Dragon, and the Kill Bill films, but I've just never been somebody who's a huge fan of those types of movies, and I don't want to insult you by playing like I know, like, and I don't want to insult you by acting like I'm an expert in something that I am absolutely not. But that's still a great question, buddy. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And the next question is from Emmanuel, and I didn't grab this off my shelf, and I meant to, but Emmanuel asked, what's my favorite documentary film? And my favorite documentary film is a film that came out in the 1980s called The Thin Blue Line. And The Thin Blue Line was released in 1988 and is directed by Errol Morris, and this is telling the true story, since it's a documentary. But one thing that's fascinating about this, before we get into what this documentary is about, the score to this is done by Philip Glass, and it's one of my favorite scores in film history. Philip Glass is one of the best composers out there. I highly recommend, even if you don't watch the movie, just checking out the score to this. I just think it's absolutely phenomenal. Philip Glass always does good scores. But anyway, what's this documentary about? Telling the story about a guy who was arrested for the murder of a police officer. The only thing is, he didn't commit the murder. In fact, he wasn't even there when this happened, but he was arrested, convicted, and put on death row for a murder he didn't convict. Mainly because the guy who he picked up earlier tonight happened to be a minor, and this guy killed somebody else, stole a gun, and then eventually he's the one who killed the cop. He just happened to be with that guy earlier tonight, not realizing who this guy was. But if they would have convicted this guy, the police, they wouldn't have been able to give him the death penalty, and they wanted to, really get justice. And by doing that, and wrongly convicting the wrong guy, it actually leads to somebody else's death. It's an extremely fascinating documentary and just shows like what people can do with the judicial system, how it can be manipulated, how when somebody just wants to convict somebody of murder, it can be done. Like doing all that for doing all this to somebody, railroading a man who wasn't even there at the time, is absolutely insane. And because of this documentary, they were able to actually convict the right man, and this guy was able to walk away. So it's one of my favorite documentaries ever. If you haven't seen it, it does have a Criterion Blu-ray release that I do have. It's called The Thin Blue Line. That's a great question, Emmanuel. Thank you so much, buddy. And the Rain Psychopath also asks, what movies do you watch during the winter season? So I grabbed 5 movies here. I was actually going to make a top 10 list of like what movies I'm watching every single winter season, but I didn't really find an area, but I couldn't really find the time, to put it on the channel. So I grabbed 5 movies and we'll do it right here on this show. So the first one up, and this is in no particular order, is Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. This movie takes place on Long Island, where I live, in the winter time, and I think they actually captured that look pretty well. I'm not 100% sure if they actually filmed this on Long Island. It kind of looks like they did. It does kind of capture the tone of Long Island in the winter, and I really appreciate that. And also, this movie, it's fantastic. Directed by Spike Jonze, written by Charlie Kaufman. It's a complete mindfuck, but in the best way possible. It stars Kate Winslet, Kirsten Dunst, and of course Jim Carrey in his best dramatic role. I mean, how do you not watch this every single Groundhog Day? Bill Murray, Groundhog Day. And it's funny, I have another question here. I'm going to answer it right now. And this was from Aces of Movies, and they asked me, what is the best on-screen moment of Bill Murray? And Bill Murray, one of my favorite comedians of all time, so he's got plenty of them. I'm not going to go to like Ghostbusters, but my favorite moment is from my favorite Bill Murray movie, and that's in this movie right here, Groundhog Day. And it's just a quick moment. I don't think a lot of people ever bring this up, and I bring it up to other people, and I don't think they find it as funny, but I'll share it with you guys. I just love it, like later in the movie where he's getting piano lessons because he's getting them every day from the same person. She doesn't realize it because Bill Murray's repeating the same day every single day. Not her. So he's going there getting his piano lessons. Of course, he's an expert piano player. And she's like, you've never played piano before? He's like, well, my father was a piano mover, so, you know. So basically just Bill Murray being sarcastic as hell. I find that stuff to be really funny. I also really love him in the movie Quick Change when he says like sitting on the train in the sad clown getup. I used to be my Facebook header for a long time back when I was in high school. I guess just because I thought I was cool for knowing the movie Quick Change, which is I believe the only movie Bill Murray ever directed, and he co-directed that movie. And I love that movie. That movie's great. Him, Gina Davis. I would say that's my favorite Bill Murray moment in film history. It's just that one little quick line. Maybe just because I was looking for something that's not necessarily one of the big moments like in like Ghostbusters. He has so many classic lines in Ghostbusters. I could go so many different ways, but I just always love Groundhog Day. And now the top 3 winter movies I watch every single year, and believe it or not, this is not necessarily a winter movie, but I watch it when it snowed out the first time I ever saw it, and I always just associate it now with winter and the snow outside. So anytime it snows outside, I'll always watch, believe it or not, Citizen Kane. I mean, it does kind of have a snow scene in this movie, so it kind of makes a little bit of sense that I would pick this one. But I always associate a good snow day with the movie Citizen Kane, which is absolute 5-star, 10 out of 10 masterpiece, one of the greatest films ever made. And then the last 2 are horror movies, and shouldn't be any surprise. Of course, I have to have The Shining. I mean, we go to the Overlook Hotel in the winter. It's snowing outside the entire movie. We end the film in the maze, in the snow. Jack Torrance freezes to death. It only makes sense that you have The Shining on there. They actually capture that beautiful look of like, you know, when it snows outside and it's coming through your window and like everything in your house kind of gets like highlighted in white. Like they capture that so well in The Shining that it has to be on this list. And then of course the one movie I watch every single winter no matter what. And it kind of got doubled up for a long time where I was watching it on Halloween and then in the winter. And that's The Thing. The Thing, my favorite alien movie of all time. My favorite John Carpenter movie. It's a masterpiece. So of course I'm watching The Thing every single winter. So that's a great question as well. Thank you so much, buddy. I really appreciate that. And the next question is from Aces of Movies, and they said, would have rather seen Isobar or The Hunter? And then they actually asked something, a follow-up to this, which ties into the same question they meant to ask this. And also, Bartholomew versus Next. Which one of those would you rather have seen? Thanks, Stacy. So all 3 of those movies that I just mentioned were unreleased projects that featured Sylvester Stallone. And the big one for me was Bartholomew versus Neff, because that movie was actually supposed to be made by John Hughes. And the way I found that out is I was looking. John Hughes apparently wrote a bunch of movies that never got released, and that was one of them. And that was supposed to also feature John Candy, which makes a lot of sense. It's supposed to come out in the early 1990s. John Candy was somebody who always worked with John Hughes. They had some sort of friendship, so that kind of makes sense. And a John Hughes movie, I would have definitely out of all the movies, I would have rather have seen that. But the other two movies that you mentioned, both of them are sci-fi movies, and I'm a big sci-fi movie fan, so I would have been interested in seeing those as well. But the most information I could find was on Bartholomew versus Neff, and I think that would have been a fantastic film. Thanks for that outside the box question. I had to do a little bit of research on that because I'm not somebody who really knows about movies that don't end up coming to fruition. There's not too many movies that I think about if they don't get made. It's actually one reason why I've never really done movie news here on the channel, is for that very reason. Just because movies get announced all the time and then they get pulled from the schedule. Look how many Star Wars movies. I don't even pay attention when they announce Star Wars stuff anymore. They just announce a new movie all the fucking time and then it never gets released. I don't know how many Star Wars movies they've announced over the last like 8 years that didn't even get released at all or didn't even go into production at all. So I don't really pay too much attention to movies that just get announced and don't get released, just because it happens all the time in Hollywood. And I felt like we kind of started to abuse the movie news just because we're reporting on so much stuff that never even comes to fruition. I like to wait until that movie's definitely put on the schedule before I start getting excited, just because movies get pulled all the time. But that was a great question. Thank you so much. It's definitely a different one. I appreciate that. And the next question is from Family Life 2. What was one of the worst movies? Mine was a movie called AI, and I watched it in the theater. I should have walked out. It's funny you said AI. We talked about this before, but AI, directed by Steven Spielberg. I actually like that movie. I think it's a pretty well done movie. That movie was actually originally supposed to be done by Stanley Kubrick before he passed away. Steven Spielberg ended up finishing the movie. The movie, it used to freak me out when I was a kid. There was just something about that robot and the scene where he eats and he ends up malfunctioning because he's not supposed to eat. That scene always, played by Haley Joel Osment, another great performance. That scene always freaked me out when I was younger. And now when I go back and watch the movie, and I haven't watched it in years, I think it's a pretty damn good movie, but I understand where you're coming from. There's plenty of movies that I've seen that I just have not loved at all. If you, I know you're probably pretty new to the channel, but one thing I always bring up is the movie Morbius. I find that movie to be just absolutely atrocious, just to look back at movies that have been bad over the past few years. Movies just, I like, there's bad movies, but at least they're so bad they're good. The worst thing a movie can do, in my opinion, is be boring. You can be bad, but at least if I'm entertained, I'm like, this is at least fun to watch. But if a movie is just, you're trying to be a good movie and it's just nothing is working, like a lot of those Sony Spider-Man movies that don't feature Spider-Man, those movies are CGI messes. They're over bloated. The acting is usually never good, but that's probably not their fault because the screenplays, I'm sure, aren't that good as well. They just feel like complete and utter cash grabs. And movies like that I find to be much, much worse than just a movie where they tried something and it didn't work. And usually the worst movies come from big budget studios, and we're getting a lot more of those lately just because, oh man, they're trying to make money and they think that giving a movie a $300 million budget guarantees a good movie. Some of the best movies that have come out over the last 5 years had budgets under $50 million. So hopefully Hollywood does get the message. But yeah, Morbius. Avoid Morbius. The only good thing about Morbius are those good opening credits. Love the color design of them. And this question's from Deathstalker. Hey John, as I sit here watching your video, I thought of another question for you. If you could choose 10 Disney movies to buy on 4K with HDR Dolby Vision, which 10 movies would you choose? Choose wisely. So I actually made a list for this. And at number 10, speaking of David Lynch, who just recently passed away, the great David Lynch, at number 10, I got The Straight Story. And this, it's funny, it's called The Straight Story, and it's probably the only straight story David Lynch ever made. It's about a brother who's dying, and his other brother is going to drive there on a lawnmower to go see him. A very simple story, but a very heartwarming story. Would love that on 4K Blu-ray. At number 9, I got Fantasia. Who doesn't want Fantasia on 4K? You know that will look great on 4K Blu-ray. This one surprised me at number 8, 101 Dalmatians, the original animated version. I grew up with the Glenn Close ones, and those are good, but I actually remember being in 4th grade and watching 102 Dalmatians, or maybe it was 101, and I don't know why. I was acting like a dick and just laughing, over-exaggerating my laugh, and I remember my teacher kicking me out. A distinct memory for me. At number 7, I got Honey, I Shrunk the Kids. Honey, I Shrunk the Kids is a fantastic movie. I actually was very partial to Honey, I Blew Up the Baby, the sequel that came out in the early 1990s. I would love a trilogy, because Honey, I Shrunk Ourselves is another good follow-up, and I believe that was Rick Moranis' last movie role. So it's pretty fascinating, but the original one's an all-time classic. And up next, I got Freaky Friday. This is the Jamie Lee Curtis, Lindsay Lohan movie that came out in the early 2000s, which is getting a sequel. That movie is really funny, and I think a 4K Blu-ray is worthy of that. Number 5, Mary Poppins. I'm not the biggest Mary Poppins fan, but it is an all-time classic that people love. That deserves to come to 4K Blu-ray. Number 4, Remember the Titans. When I was a kid, this was my favorite sports movie. You grow up a little bit and you realize they're probably over-exaggerating some stuff. It's a little bit melodramatic, but it's a heartwarming story, and it's something that everyone should watch today because it still means a lot. Like, it takes place in a segregated high school in Alabama, and it's about, bringing whites and blacks together. And it's something that a message that, we shouldn't have to keep teaching, but yet for some reason, people insist on learning this lesson the hard way. Watch Remember the Titans. 3, Bambi. One of the saddest movies of all time. It's been talked about forever. How does this movie not have a 4K Blu-ray at this point? It's one of the most famous Disney movies ever. Everyone knows about Bambi and Bambi's mom and what happened to them. At number 2, just because I'm a 90s kid, I gotta have the Mighty Ducks. I want all of them. Some people prefer the Mighty Ducks too, but I think the original Mighty Ducks is the best one. I think if we ever get them, we'll get them all on 4K Blu-ray, but this is Disney, so who the hell knows? And then at number 1, Tron and Tron Legacy. I think we'll be getting Tron on 4K Blu-ray this year. That rumor's been pretty strong, so I think we'll finally get it, but can you imagine Tron on 4K Blu-ray? It should look absolutely stunning. Same thing with Legacy, which I don't like as much as the original Tron, but hey, the original Tron, I want that on 4K Blu-ray as well. So that was a great question. Thank you so much. And the next question is from Poppin' Fresh, and he said, do you really notice a massive difference between Dolby Vision and HDR10 Plus? Which format do you prefer? And, when it comes to Dolby Vision versus HDR10, the big difference is Dolby Vision does have a wider color gamut. It does have more colors that they're working with. So, on paper, Dolby Vision should be the better format. But the thing is, not every movie gets Dolby Vision on it. It's like sometimes you'll just get HDR, especially if it's a Warner Brothers release. For the most part, they just like to operate with HDR10. Inglourious Basterds that just came out from Arrow Video, that's just HDR10. Sometimes they'll go back to movies like Bram Stoker's Dracula, which is a Sony release, and another Sony release like I just talked about earlier this year. Well, actually not this year, I guess it's technically at the end of last year, but A League of Their Own, that got a Dolby Vision 4K Blu-ray upgrade over the previously released version that didn't have Dolby Vision, and you do notice a difference in those scenarios when they're upgrading them to Dolby Vision. Sometimes it's better, sometimes it's worse. In the case of A League of Their Own, I thought the Dolby Vision was a noticeable improvement, but it's also not the world's biggest improvement. That's always kind of been my thing here on the channel. I won't even bring up that the Dolby Vision looks better than the HDR10, unless it's noticeable. If it's like a minor upgrade, the human eye, like, unless you're sitting there, like, scoping at it, like, oh, okay, I could see it there. All right, then, yeah, you could look for, like, those differences. But I like to, like, do reviews here on the channel and kind of look at it as from how you guys will be mostly looking at it. Like, how does it look to you on the couch? Does it look good? Does it look great? So I'll only bring up the Dolby Vision looking better or the HDR10 looking better if it's a noticeable difference. Now, I don't think I've ever really, I guess I have, I can't off the top of my head, but I think there was a couple scenarios where I thought the HDR10 did look better than the Dolby Vision, but it's very, very, very rare. For the most part, just because they have the wider range, Dolby Vision will look better than HDR. A good example is The Stepfather on 4K Blu-ray. I felt like the Dolby Vision did look noticeably better in like certain lights highlighted in the background than in comparison to the regular HDR10. But this isn't often. For the most part, when you buy a movie on 4K Blu-ray, even on the best players with the best TVs, there's not much of a big difference between HDR and Dolby Vision. I know people fanboy over Dolby Vision, and I agree. It is the better of the formats. It's got a lot more going for it as far as regular HDR or HDR10 Plus, but it's not something that the naked eye is going to notice. Sometimes it is, but for the most part, it's very similar. I don't think it makes the world's biggest difference. Some people might argue with that, but in my experience in comparing them, it's not that often, and if it is a noticeable difference, I'll make sure to take note of that. But that's a great question. Thank you so much, buddy. I really appreciate that. And the next questions we're going to answer, and we'll probably end the show like this, is we're going to do some questions about the channel here. Save those for the end, just because I know not everybody might not be interested in this stuff, but this is from Frank's ex-wife, and this is very interesting, and I'm going to put a poll out for you guys tomorrow about this and get your thoughts on it. And he said, would you consider doing a question of the week where you pick your favorite question of the Q&A show? The winner could get a digital code. So I'm interested in doing this, but this really is going to come down to you guys. Maybe you guys don't really like necessarily me having the option to pick out my favorite question because I don't want to hurt anyone's feelings. Like, that's one thing about me. I hate disappointing people, so I don't want to like pick a favorite question and be like, oh, this is better than everybody else's question in here. So I'm going to leave that up to you guys. I'll put a poll out, see what you guys think. Do you guys like the friendly competition? I don't want to like upset people. Like, I'm not going to do the digital code giveaway for this if people don't want to do it. So I'll leave it up to you guys. That's a good idea, Frank's ex-wife. I appreciate that. And as always, didn't realize Frank had an ex-wife. Next one's from Dark Room Reviews, and he said, where do you see the channel in 5 years? My hope is that this channel in 5 years becomes, financially stable to the point where this is my full-time job. Not necessarily on YouTube, but where I get to, like, talk about movies for my living. That's my dream, is to be a full-time film critic. I don't know if it'll ever happen. If it doesn't, it doesn't. That's the way the world goes. I have a regular job, pays the bills for the most part, but I would like this channel to be a little bit more financially stable. That's always the big thing. I want to keep increasing subscribers. But for the most part, since I've had the YouTube channel, never really made too much money on it. It would be nice to like actually make this my actual regular job. For right now, it's really just my hobby slash my passion. Like, I'm a huge film fan. I'm a huge physical media fan. I love that I met other people like you guys who are into movies and physical media like I am, because in my regular life, that's non-existent. So without YouTube, I would have never found so many of you great people out there. I've said it a million times, the movie community, the physical media community, for the most part, filled with great people, as long as we stay away from like the sickos who are Zack Snyder fans who are fanboy over them all the time. Like, that stuff, and some of the Star Wars community can be a little bit toxic, but the physical media community is great. So, if I could just meet more people and just kind of keep doing what I'm doing, overall, I'd be happy with that. But if I had a goal, I would like this channel to, be just financially successful a little bit, to where I can do more. I would love to do more. I feel like I only really can put out like 4 or 5 videos a week, but I would love to go back to putting out 7 a week. But, with the amount of time I have working and editing, it's really hard to do that. So I would like to get back to where I could do 7 videos a week. So that's a great question, Dark Room Reviews. I appreciate that as well. And the next questions are from Tom Cruise's burner account. And he said, are you going to do a complete movie collection update video anytime soon? And he said, when is Matt coming back? I remember a while back you promised we would be back for a Q&A show. So for people who don't know Matt, and maybe you're new to the channel, Matt and me actually started this channel, Let's Talk Entertainment and Media. It was supposed to be a combination of a video game channel and a movie channel. Just didn't work out. It became more of a physical media channel, and then after about a year and a half, Matt actually ended up leaving the channel. He's just not somebody who liked being on camera. He never felt comfortable doing this. And it just became too much work for him, so it just ended up becoming my channel. And I've tried to get Matt to come back, and we've been close a couple of times. Like, I've had him on the schedule, we were going to film, and then it didn't come together. Matt really doesn't feel comfortable in front of the camera, and we got to respect that. Like, I know that people liked him, and I try and tell him, I show him these comments that people said, like, hey, people still ask about you all these years later, and he's not into it. He feels much more comfortable being away. But one day I'll have to twist his arm and get him back on here. People ask about him. And now, as far as the movie collection update, that's another one where I have to set a lot of time aside to film that video. I definitely want to do it. I haven't done one since 2023, so we didn't even get one last year. I would love to do one in 2025. I'm assuming that this year I will be able to do it, hopefully by the summer. I had time last Sunday, I thought, and then, things kind of fell apart. It's tough to fit these things into the schedule, film all the videos, and, like, to do the collection video, to do it the way I want to do it, it'll probably take, like, a whole half a day, because I like to do little mini reviews when I'm going through my entire collection. I don't like to just show it off. Want it to be entertaining for you guys, so for me to do it the way I want to do it, it's going to be a very, very long project, especially since if you go back to my first collection video from 2022, I mean, my collection essentially from that has doubled just from being on YouTube and all the movies I reviewed in the last over 3 years. It's a very, very different collection. I would love to show it off to you guys, and I'm hoping to do that sometime, in the next few months. And as always, keep sending in questions like this, put my foot to the flames, and it'll definitely make me do it. So I appreciate questions like that. Tom Cruise's burner account, thank you so much. And that's questions from Timmy, and he said, for next week's show, what are your top 5 favorite Saturday Night Live skits of all time? So Saturday Night Live, I'm actually a huge fan of it. My favorite movie from last year was the movie Saturday Night. I grew up just watching, like, the Will Ferrell years on Saturday Night itself. That cast was great. Then I went back, and, like, back in the day, speaking of physical media, there used to be DVDs of collections of the actors on Saturday Night Live. So they would have, like, a Will Ferrell collection. They would have a Chris Farley collection. Now, all the big names that were on that show, they had their own collections. So I picked my top 5 favorite skits, and I didn't want to take them from like the same actors because I could do a whole top 5 on Chris Farley. He was my favorite. But at number 5, Eddie Murphy. He basically was the best actor on Saturday Night Live. Saved Saturday Night Live in the 80s. His best skit is Mr. Robinson's Neighborhood. It's a play on, you know, Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood.
Nobody home, I'll break in. It feels real good to walk streets again after being in jail.
So that was a great one. I love it. Like, you know, basically he's just a more rundown version of Mr. Rogers, the ghetto version. It's hysterical. Number 4, I got more cowbell.
I got a fever, and the only prescription is more cowbell.
This one features not just Will Ferrell, but the great Christopher Walken playing the Blue Oyster Cult song, Jesus Don't Fear the Reaper. I got a fever, and the only prescription is more cowbell. It's a great one. Number 3, The Denise Show. This is from Adam Sandler, and this is one of my favorite skits. It's so fucking funny. Basically, he used to date this girl, Denise, Adam Sandler, and now he just has a show dedicated to her, trying to understand why they broke up.
And now, The Denise Show, with your host, Brian.
This is the part of the show where I call up Denise and hang up on her. Or, like, later in the show, he's like, when we were at Chuck E. Cheese, how long did Denise say we'd be together? And then he's like, the answer was forever. That was a lie. Just a great skit. Number 2, they had numerous versions of this, but, you know, Celebrity Jeopardy. I love that they're playing into the fact that, you know, they would have Sean Connery on there. Some great, like Tom Hanks pops up in one of them. So many great celebrities pop up. Other celebrities playing other celebrities. It's fantastic. Will Ferrell plays the host. Alex Trebek in this, and all the subjects that these people have to choose from is just because they're all stupid or all absolutely hysterical. One of them is automatic points. States that end in Hampshire. Condiments, like this condiment is made from mustard seeds. The answer, mustard. Mustard is made from mustard seeds. French Stewart, grinning like an idiot, thinks he's got the right answer. Let's see what you wagered. Texas, with a $sign next to it. Oh my god, Celebrity Jeopardy is so fucking funny. And then at number 1, I have to go with Matt Foley, motivational speaker, played by the great Chris Farley. If there's a best skit out there of Chris Farley, this would be it. Chippendales is great as well. Schwip's Gay, that's another great one. There's so many great Chris Farley skits, but this is definitely the number 1 for me. My name is Matt Foley. I am 35 years old. I am divorced, and I live in a van down by the river. Your father tells me that you've been not using your papers for reading, but for rolling doobies. Oh my god, it's a classic. So that was a great question as well. I always love talking some SNL. And guys, that's going to do it here for me on this week's Let's Talk Q&A show. I still have plenty of questions, so if I missed your question this week or you sent me in multiple questions, we'll answer more of those questions on next week's show. I tried to answer as many as I could, and guys, keep sending in those questions. I'll get to them eventually. I really appreciate it. Thank you guys all so much for sending in those questions. I can't express to you guys how much that means to me. Just to see this show growing on its own, I appreciate it. I love talking movies. I love that I get to communicate with you guys all the time. Thank you guys all so much. And if you like this video, don't forget to hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, share the video if you could. Also, guys, we have channel memberships. If you want to become a friend of the channel, a producer for the channel like John Doe Juggalo, or a channel director like Frank from Frank's Media and Reviews and Mr. Smelly Potato, you guys can look for all that information in the description below. But as always, there's no pressure. If you got no money to throw away, don't worry about it. All we hope is that you enjoyed this video. And if you did, get out in those streets, tell your friends about us, and then we'll be seeing you around.